Hi there guys, it's a beautiful summer's day and we're well within our summer in mid-July. I did a video not long ago called The Wild Edibles of Spring, which covered sort of a lot of the edibles you start to see emerging in March, April through to June. And a lot of those edibles are short-lived, or some of them are anyway, but then a lot of them will carry through to maturity, even through to the end of the year. As far up as November, some of them will stretch. And I wasn't able to cover them all, so this video is really going to cover some of the edibles that are now emerging through from June, July, August right through to the end of the year, or near to the end of the year, that join the plot of a lot of the edibles that are available in spring. And a lot of the plants I'll cover today, I won't really mention just the edible side of it. We'll talk a bit about the medicinal aspects that they can cover as well. So this video really is kind of like some of the wild edibles and medicinal edibles of summer that can join the spring plot, and throughout the year you end up with a really broad range of edible plants that you can choose from to cover all aspects of things, and so it's worth knowing a lot of them. While I've been sitting here, I've found my first edible and medicinal of the day, and this is a herb bennet, a member of the rose family. Very easy to identify. It has a 5-petal yellow flower that you can see there, and you don't often see that on the plant when it's growing in a lot of shade. You'll often see this typical bristly fruit head, and it's a really easy way of identifying it. You often see 3 or 4 of those on a plant just shooting up. But it's an interesting plant, and medicinally it was used as a chewing herb, so for sores in the mouth you could chew it to alleviate sores. It makes a good mouthwash, and also it makes a good tea as a liver tonic to sort of cleanse the liver. But this particular plant as an edible, you just eat the young leaves, young shoots, you know, you can eat the sort of seeds and flowers, etc. The whole plant really is fairly edible, and you can have it cooked or raw. So although it doesn't provide you with much, it's a good one to know, and it can be combined with lots of other things that you can find. What I've just picked out the ground here is another member of the umbelliferae family, and this is a wild carrot, or Queen Anne's lace. And it's an interesting edible to find. It is effectively a wild carrot, and there's the carrot there, just as that root. But there's a few very telltale signs for wild carrot that you can use to identify it. The first one I look for is when I'm looking at it at a distance, and I might not be able to work it out, but it stands out quite well, a bit like silverweed. It has like white fur all over the very firm stalk, and at a distance it has like a sort of white shine to it, and that's a good way of picking it up from a distance. You look at the other kind of members of the family, they've got a very kind of green stem, or in some cases red stem or spotted stem, really depends which one we're talking about. If we're referring to edibles, usually a greenish reddish stem. So this one is quite easy to pick out from a distance. As I say, it has a bit of a sheen. But in the flower head, when you get up close, if it is beginning to flower, as you can see there, you've got a purple kind of oddity, a purple flower, bang in the middle of the canopy. And on this one that's flowered, you can see that just there quite easily. And if you look underneath the canopy, you'll see some spikes, you know, some sort of thorny type spikes growing off directly underneath the canopy. And the same goes for the flower heads as well, the individual flower heads. And although fool's parsley has a similar trait, it is very different to wild carrot, so the two can't really be mixed up if you know them well. But if you do get up close to it and you see all these traits and you think, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's wild carrot, just uproot it, grab it quite firmly, pull it out, and you'll see the carrot root. And if you smell it, as soon as it comes out of the ground, it smells exactly like carrot, because it is a carrot. And if you break it, yeah, the smell obviously intensifies because you've broken it open. But the key to picking this one and eating it quite sort of pleasantly is that you need to pick it early on when it emerges, 2 or 3 weeks after it's beginning to emerge, because the root will be, you know, like a typical carrot, you know, quite crunchy, a bit translucent and a bit watery, and that's really when it's quite tasty. This one is far too large to be considered edible from a root perspective anyway. And as you can see there, the root becomes very hard and woody, and it's not particularly tasty, although you could probably clean your teeth with it if you chewed it for long enough. So it's a decent edible to find, and it's quite easy to identify. and it does emerge, you know, sort of later in the year to cow parsley. So you know, you can tell it apart quite easily. You'll never see them lingering around the same place. This plant here is called sweet woodruff, and it's in the same family as cleavers. As you can see, there's quite a similarity in its appearance, except this one grows in the shaded areas of the woodlands, so you'll see it growing in clusters all over the forest floor, just coming up out of the leaves. Traditional medicine, they often used it to sort of remove liver obstructions, as a tonic, but it's actually mildly toxic, and the toxicity is cumulative. It was traditionally used as a stewing herb as well, which is probably how they administered it, but I'd probably stay away from it in that respect. There's more edibles out there that are far safer and have far more certainty attached to their uses, so but it's an interesting one to know anyway. What I've just dug up here is a pignut, and pignut is a member of the umbelliferae family, so the carrot and parsley family, a bit like the wild carrot we looked at earlier, although it's a different plant altogether really. So yeah, it's that classic kind of umbrella-headed plant, white flower canopy that stands up above the forest floor. Although this one's quite small, and this is probably at its maximum height really, give or take, for pignut. And even though it's lost its flowers, it's still very easy to see and identify, and it grows in clusters. But one of the main traits of it is its leaf, and that makes it very, very easy to identify. Often single-stemmed, it will branch off towards maturity and still be very easy to identify. But digging them up can be tricky, and I should mention that it is illegal to dig them up. You need the landowner's permission to dig up pignuts. But if you are going to go digging them up, you've got between sort of 3 and 8 inches to dig, depending on where it grows in the soil. And at the end of it, if you dig alongside, as you saw me do, you'll see the nut expose itself. Often you'll kind of knock away the skin to reveal the fleshy root beneath, and that will kind of make it stand out in the soil, and you'll know you've found the root. But all you need to do is pick the nut off, and you just peel away the skin with your fingers. And early on in the year, this is much easier to do. As the nut matures, as the root matures, the skin tends to bind to the nut a bit more and be a bit trickier. I'll come in a bit closer to kind of peel off, but that's it really. This is a bit of a small one, hit and miss really, and that's the nut. And you can just eat it straight out the ground, and it is really delicious. And if you're going to go and dig loads of them up, it's best really to have a little shovel, else it becomes quite tiresome. But it's a really good edible, really delicious, very starchy, and yeah, good one to know. We had a look at another member of the cleavers family earlier today. That was sweet woodruff, and this is another member of the family as well, very much like cleavers. Looks exactly the same, just a lot smaller, and often in beds of white flowers when you come across it in open canopy. And this is hedge bedstraw, and hedge bedstraw is an edible, and it can be eaten just like cleavers. You can steam it like that and eat it as a parcel. It's best eaten young in a stew. It has some interesting medicinal uses as well. It's often used to stimulate the uterus and also to treat epilepsy, so it's got quite a lot of interest on that side of it. So it's an interesting edible, and does carry some quite sort of strong medicinal properties that are still used today. What I've got here is red campion, and you'll find red campion growing from May all the way through to August, and it's in the same family as chickweed. It bears quite a resemblance to Mousear actually, in terms of the way it grows and the way the leaves sprout off a single stem. but it's quite easy to identify. It has a 5-petal flower. It's deeply notched, and traditionally it was used to treat snake bites, but that's been disbanded through modern technology, really, and modern research. But on this plant, really, what you want to be eating is just the leaves when it's young, and although it doesn't provide you with much, it is an edible nonetheless. What we've got here is more of a medicinal plant than an edible, although you could eat it in a medicinal fashion. It's a member of the mint family, so it has that classic look, and this is Hedge woundwort. And you'll find this growing from as early as March all the way through to September, and it's quite an iconic plant. Traditionally used to stem the flow of blood, so they would get the plant and bruise it up and bind it to a wound, and it would clean that wound up and stop the bleeding. And later, when you took it off, you'd have a nice clean wound there. But through modern science, the entire plant has been sort of determined as an antiseptic, has antiseptic properties, and it's fairly potent in comparison to a number of things. So it's a really good plant to know, and you can use it. And I've used it on wounds and been very impressed. It does clean wounds up very well, and it has quite a long lifespan throughout the year. You can make a good like sort of topical cream out of it by using the leaves and mushing them all up and mixing them with fat, and you can sort of rub that on wounds and sores and cuts and grazes, and it cleans the wound up really well. But it's easy to identify. The flower head won't be around early in the year when it emerges, but you will be able to see the typical long sort of stem before the leaf all the way up in uniform, and often it will start to do that. So it won't be single stemmed to some degree. It will branch off, and in a classic sort of pitchfork style, and you'll see loads of them in the hedges looking like that, and it's quite easy to identify. So really good medicinal plant to know. What I've just picked here is a plant called shepherd's purse, and shepherd's purse is a member of the mustard family, and it's got quite a bitter taste to it. But the nice thing about the plant is the whole thing is edible, and it likes to grow in sort of meadows and wastelands. I found it on this walkway here where the sunlight's hit the forest floor, and it's a good edible to know. But it's very easy to identify even from a young age because it carries this trait early on. You can see all the way up the stem you've got these little purse-like seed pods, so it's quite easy to sort of pick out from a crowd. What I've got here is another iconic medicinal. If you're ever sort of exploring the medicinal realm, I'm sure this is one you'll stumble across first. It's St. John's wort, and been used for a whole manner of internal and external things throughout history. Contains a chemical called hyperforin, and that's believed to be why it's so good as almost like an antibiotic, sort of treating things like IBS, stomach inflammations and upsets, things like also topical things like cuts, bruises, wounds, infections. If you have an infection and you put this on it, it's very good against viral infections as well, which is quite amazing for such a plant. But one of the things that it's pretty well known for throughout the world is an antidepressant. It contains a chemical that sort of interferes with neurotransmitters in the brain and gives like a state of euphoria. Oh, there you go. There's a bumblebee. Gives a state of euphoria which reduces or alleviates the symptoms of depression, and it's very easy to identify as well. There's holes in the leaf, and if you hold it up to the light, you'll see little holes throughout the leaf, and it's a very, very easy way of identifying it. And those, it doesn't take time really for those holes to appear through maturity. Right from the offset, from March all the way to September, as a young or old plant, that'll be a sure way of identifying it. But the sort of firework-like flowers that bloom out of the top, the yellow flowers, are a very easy way of seeing it, rising above the long grass and hedgerows, if you're wading through woodland. But open canopy is where you'll find it you know, where sunlight hits the floor, obviously, like most of these things. But very, very good medicinal, and one worth looking into. I'm in some marshlands here and it's infested with flies. I've had a few go in my mouth already, so I've opted for the scarf, so I do apologise about that. But I've got an interesting plant here that does like growing in marshlands, and it's called ragged robin. And you can tell by the flower head that it stands out pretty well, and I'll talk a bit about that in a minute. But this is in the chickweed family, so the same family as Mousear, and we had a look at red campion as well today, so same family as that, and it is edible. And like most edibles, you just want to eat the young leaves, young shoots. This is quite mature, so you probably want to eat the younger leaves towards the top. And although it doesn't provide you with a huge meal, it is an edible worth knowing, as they all are. But the flower head there, you can see it's a 4-petaled flower despite its appearance, and each petal branches off into another 4 lobes, and it gives it a bit of a firework effect there. Makes it stand out very well. But you'll find this from May all the way through to August. What I've got here is a plant called Herb Robert, and Herb Robert is a member of the cranesbill family. A family nickname by their beaked fruit. As you can see there, it makes it pretty easy to pick out. And all members of the family share a similar trait, which makes them quite easy to distinguish. So Herb Robert's leaf has 3 main lobes with lots of smaller lobes kind of branching off. Looks a little bit like a cow parsley leaf in some ways, you know, quite typical really in its appearance, but it's a good plant to know. Traditionally used for toothache, you chew it, and also use it as an astringent to kind of help heal wounds and tighten the skin up. But as an edible, it's full of iron, vitamin A, B and C, and has been eaten throughout history really, and used for a lot of different things. So if you wanted to benefit from that vitamin content, you could eat it raw, put it on a salad, you could put it in a stew. And obviously in exposed sunlight you get this kind of red effect. Don't let that put your ID off, but you could probably just pick younger leaves than that haven't been so exposed. So an interesting plant, and definitely one worth knowing. What I've got here is another member of the mint family, and this is self-heal, and it's been used throughout history again as a medicinal. It was consumed to sort of remedy internal issues like internal bleeding, piles, intestinal issues. It's used as an astringent, so that means it sort of tightens the skin together or tightens tissue together, and that's often what it was used for. It would make quite a good mouthwash, and you'd sort of boil it up and make like a mouthwash with it, like a tea, and gargle to sort of remedy sore throats and things. So I guess to sort of reduce inflammation in the throat and things like that, it would be quite handy for that sort of thing. I've got another member of the cranesbill family here. As you can see by the ID, you've got the classic beaked fruit, 5-petaled flower that's pink, and this is hedgerow cranesbill, sort of like a more robust member of the family. And medicinally, it shares the same traits as Herb Robert, and the sort of same disciplines as toothache, gastrointestinal issues, tummy upsets, a bit like an astringent in some respects. But as an edible, it's actually very nutritious and quite tasty. You can eat the young leaves, you can eat the beaked fruit, you can eat the petals. Most of the plant, when it's quite young, as it gets older it toughens up, like most edibles. But this is a good one to know, and it's worth keeping your eye out for. What I've got here is a member of the willow herb family, and there are a few different willow herbs out there. There's rosebay, there's greater, and there's also broadleaf, and this looks like greater willow herb. Traditionally it was used to make tea, especially in England we used to do that a lot. and also eat the stalks, like steam them like asparagus and eat them. But these days they don't often use it for that. I think it does have some medical uses as well as an astringent for like stomach upsets, but there are a lot of other edibles around that you can get a lot more from at this time of year. So although it's worth knowing, you know, and you can try it, there are other ones around that probably provide you with a lot more. What I've just picked here is a clover, and this is red clover. It's a member of the pea family, which is quite a large family of plants, but some of which you really want to avoid. But with the case of red clover, it is edible. You can eat it raw in salad, or you can cook with it. And it is a decent edible because when it actually flowers, this flower head here is full of protein. It's similar to white clover. I've got one growing down here. You can see this one's just quite young, but the flower heads really do match in size. But it's got quite a long lifespan as well. You find them from May all the way through to September in some cases, and it's a good edible to find. What I've just picked here is another member of the chickweed family, and this one grows from early April all the way through to October, so it's available for quite a broad range of the year. It's common Mousear, that's what it's called, or Mousear chickweed, and unlike regular chickweed, it grows quite singly, kind of in open pastures and grassy areas like we're in now. This is a cut right the way through the woodland, and you often see a lot of plants here that you don't find in the woods, obviously, because there's plenty of sunlight. But yeah, it's a nice edible to find. You can eat it raw, or you can eat it, you know, you can cook it. It's best to cook it really, because it's quite hairy, so yeah, often like through cooking that softens up the hairs and makes it a bit more palatable. But it's got a nice kind of 5-petal flower with deep notches, so that gives it a good ID, and also you've got these uniform leaves all the way up the main stem, which makes it very easy to identify, and yeah, doesn't grow much higher than this really. I've picked a plant I'm sure you'll recognise. This is Silverweed, given its name by the shimmering effect. It's covered in white hairs, and when the light hits it and it sort of the angles change as you walk by, you get this kind of like shimmering effect. So it's quite easy to spot and identify based upon that, and you can also see it's pretty obvious in terms of its structure, the way the leaves come off the stem there. But it grows in clusters, so it sort of grows out like this, and there's loads of it plated everywhere, all over the floor, where sunlight hits the ground. So you can find it in abundance in open pastures. But as an edible, it's really nice as a tea. It makes a really good tea, and the roots are edible raw, or you can cook them, and they're very nutritious. So a good one to know. But medicinally, it treats a few different things in the terms of prevention. So you can rub it on your skin to prevent sunburn, and also rub it on your feet and hands to prevent blisters, depending on what you're doing. I found another member of the Musk family here, and this is apple mint, and apple mint's very popular in cultivation for things like mint sauces. You'll find this one from July all the way to September, so it's available pretty much through the broad stretch of summer. And this one carries some interesting edible and medicinal uses. We've looked at a few members of the mint family today, and they're often associated with creeping roots, so you know, you find clusters of them when you do find them, which is great from an edible and medicinal perspective. But as a medicinal, this one carries some uses that are really good in the field. You know, a bit like Bulbasaur, you can mix it with hot water, bruise the leaves, and sort of open up your airways if you're ever feeling a bit under the weather. And also sort of really good as a tea, you know, very good as a liver tonic, good for things like settling the stomach, like IBS and other kind of stomach upsets, which is something I actually use it for. I found it very effective with a bit of sugar. But yeah, as an edible, you know, you can use it for pretty much anything, you know, that you enjoy using mint with. So you know, seasoning food, you know, making teas, just eating it alone, cooked, raw. The flowers are edible, so a really good edible to find, and you know, one of the more pleasant ones really in terms of smell and taste. There are patches of wild mint all over this moor, especially where the soil's a bit damper. It's got a very typical minty smell, and I can imagine you can use this for a whole number of things. A bit like the apple mint we looked at a minute ago. It probably shares a lot of the same medicinal and sort of edible traits as a lot of the other scented mints that you find. I'm in a boggy area of the woodland here, and a lot of mosquitoes about. Some of them are really going for me, so I won't stay here too long. But this is red dead nettle, another member of the mint family. It's quite a small one, quite easy to identify, sort of typical leaves, and the flower has quite a large overhang top lip. And this one's sort of gradually turning red as they do, you know, as they mature. But you know, you can eat it, you know, in any preference you like, really, from March all the way through to November. So yeah, another one to keep your eye out for. This evening I've been digging around in all the boggy areas of the woodland and getting taken out by flies, so I do apologise if you see me doing this all the time. I'm just trying to avoid getting bitten and hearing that noise of the mozzies flying around my ear. But I found some watercress, and you can see here you've got the typical leaves there of some watercress, the two main lobes, and then the larger lobe just on top there, and you have the long stem with the four-petalled flower at the top and the seed pods. So quite easy to identify, quite easy to see. The interesting thing about watercress is another mozzie. The interesting thing about watercress is it's very high in vitamin C and vitamin A, and it's also got vitamin K and iodine in it as well, and a bit of iron. I think it's sort of per 100 gram you get about 75% vitamin C and about 60% vitamin A, so very good for fighting off scurvy and a great source of nutrition really. But it's also an anti-cancer. I think medicinally they've done a lot of tests with it on breast cancer and on lung cancer. It's good for lung inflammation as well as a medicinal. But you'll find this one from May, I know this is a bit wilted, all the way through to October, and a really good edible. But one thing to note is do not pick it when it's been growing around dung and stagnant water. You know, if sheep and cows have been crapping there, you don't want to know about it, because it carries, you know, it harbours parasites, and one in particular that causes liver fluke. You just don't want to go anywhere near it. So if you find a good water source near fresh water, running water, then yeah, it'd be a good one to pick. But interestingly enough, I found some fool's watercress as well just nearby, and you can see some distinct differences. I should really get that one back. The leaf is completely different, so's the flower, and the flower actually on fool's watercress grows off of the main stalk opposite the leaf, which you don't get on the normal watercress at all. So there's some real differences there between the two, and the problem really isn't eating this one because this isn't poisonous, it's because this looks like lesser water parsnip, and that is very poisonous, and you don't want to get that wrong. So I do a bit of research before you go and pick it. Just as I try and leave the bog, it sucks me back in. Found another member of the mint family here, and this is watermint. And watermint is a really good edible. And medicinal, shares much of the same traits as the other mints we've seen. You know, sort of gastrointestinal issues, IBS, settling the stomach, clearing the airways, good for tea, anything else you can think of. You know, we use it for a whole range of things these days. But this flower head will eventually kind of emerge, be quite bristly and pink, and it'll probably be a lot easier to spot, and the plant will probably turn a bit of a deeper shade of purple as it matures. But you find this from sort of July all the way through to September, so around for the broad range of summer. You do get a lot of hybrids in the mint family, so sometimes you can't always pick them out. But yeah, really good to keep your eye out for these things. Stumble across the mint family once more, although it isn't difficult. Got lots of ground ivy growing around here, and this is edible. Another member of the mint family, like I say, and edible raw or cooked, and a good edible. You'll find this one from March all the way through to pretty much the end of the year, give or take a couple of months. What I've just picked here is some musk mallow, and there are a few different types of mallows that you'll find. There's common mallow, there's marsh mallow and tree mallow, and they all do sort of differ slightly in their appearance, and the key to sort of picking out musk mallow is the leaf. You can see the leaf there, very distinct, a bit like pig nut actually, whereas the other mallows have a much sort of larger, broader, typical leaf with much bigger lobes. It also has this sort of fruiting nutlet at the end, and that's a very easy way of picking it out. But as a medicinal, you can use musk mallow for a number of different things. Very good for reducing stomach acid, good for kind of reducing blood sugar levels, and you can rub it on insect bites as well to help neutralise them. Very good for that. But as an edible, you can eat all of it really. The stem's a bit tough and it does make a good cord, but the leaf, the flower, the seed heads, you know, the root, you know, you can eat a lot, and it's a good edible. The flowers are nice actually. They've got like a really kind of sweet taste to them in the centre, and yeah, they make quite a nice addition to salad. I mean, the leaves are a bit bland, but you know, the entire plant's edible, and it does have some flavour to it, and mixed with sort of a variety of other things, I imagine it, you know, it could accompany them quite well. I've got another member of the umbelliferae family here, and this is upright hedge parsley. And you can see it's much more slender and much more wiry than the huge sort of hogweeds and cow parsleys that you see sort of rising above other vegetation as you're walking along with huge umbel flower heads. The flower heads on this are really small, and they often branch off in threes, you know, with tiny little white flowers at the end, and that's a good way of picking them out. That kind of archway you see, very, very typical. But as an edible, it has a few things to offer us. You can eat the leaves, they're best eaten cooked. The flowers, the seeds, and you can eat the root. You can peel the root in July, like we're in now, while it's a bit softer, and just eat that and get the starch out of it. You can even cook with it as well. But as a medicinal, it's really the seeds you want to turn to. They're very rich in protein and fat, and they act as an anti-inflammatory and they're antiviral. So they're quite valuable, really. But yeah, you'll find this one from July all the way through to September. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it useful. You know, we covered quite a lot of the core edibles that are available, you know, rising up through end of June, July, all the way through to the end of the year. And like I said at the beginning of the video, you know, a lot of the edibles that we covered in spring are still around, and they're still just as edible as they were when they first emerged. You know, some of them anyway. You know, a lot of the early ones die off, but all these edibles that you're seeing now in July will join them and give you a much sort of wider crop to pick from for the whole year. And we'll have fruits later on in the year as well, which will be, you know, which are really nice, and I'll revisit this series then, and you know, we'll cover some fruits and, you know, do a similar video to what we're doing now, and perhaps even revisit some of these edibles and see where they are in their life, and you know, how realistic it is that we can sort of harvest them for our needs. I also wanted to just say at the end of this video a huge thank you to my subscribers. You know, I try and put as much info out as I can when I can, and I hope the videos are worth it and the information you get's worth it. And I do enjoy learning from you guys and the comments you put down and watching the vids, etc. And yeah, it's a good community on YouTube. You can get a lot of information out of it for nothing really in some respects. But I just also wanted to say thank you for those of you who bought the guide. you know, I know a lot of what we've covered today is probably not in the guide, but I am making a proper field guide, you know, that will stretch across all the seasons and will be laminated, and you can I'll be sort of doing a hard copy, you know, that I can post out to people so they can have a look through it and put it in their kits as opposed to just download it. But yeah, thank you so much for watching the channel, and I'll see you in the next vid.